Hello and welcome to a new edition of True Audiophiles. Today we're going to be doing a sound quality shootout with John Coltrane, Coltrane's Sound. And big reason why I'm doing it is because Rhino just released a high fidelity version of it. What that means is Kevin Gray cut it from the original analog master tape. It was pressed on 180 gram vinyl at Optimal, I believe. And one thing that I failed to mention if you watch my previous video, the Cars video, is the jacket's super high quality. It's gatefold. Actually, I'll show you here. You've got the obi like the Cars one had, and it's a nice gatefold with a bunch of kind of a cool picture and a picture of some information about the tracks here, and I guess the order. And they've got an inner sleeve notes that's in there that kind of shows, it shows a picture of the master tape boxes. And high quality jacket, super thick, glossy on the front and back, and then kind of a matte finish in the inside. So very, very nice packaging, I have to say. And then what I'm going to be comparing it to is the only other version I have, and that is the 2010 ORG version, which is a 45 RPM. It was cut by Bernie Grundman and Bellman. They both have their initials in this, so I'm guessing they may have traded off on different ones, but would obviously be a gatefold as well. Not quite as thick of a stock on the cover as the new one, and it's not glossy. It's kind of the traditional matte finish on most records. So if you haven't watched any of my videos on the sound quality shootouts before, this is kind of how I do it, and I apologize for those who have watched a bunch of my sound quality shootouts because you're going to hear this again and again. But generally how I do these is I will listen to the new version that I just got. In this case, it's the Rhino. Listen to it all the way through, determine which track or tracks I feel make a great example to demo and kind of A/B between the two versions or multiple versions I have to help me decide which version I can say is the better one, or it gives me a better impression of what it's going to sound like. And I do that just because it's easier. Your sound memory is not as good as it is sight memory, and it's just better to do it that way, and it takes a lot less time, and generally you're going to find, I found it's going to give you the same results as opposed to doing it the other ways, or any other ways for that matter. So we'll start off with the Rhino High Fidelity. Thought it sounded really good. I think it had great soundstage. It had a wide soundstage, a pretty deep soundstage. Tonal quality and balance, as usual from a Kevin Gray, is pretty even. Good bass, decent treble, great clarity on the mid-range, all those kinds of things, and I thought it sounded very good. And I should probably back up and tell you that I decided on the track The Night Has 1,000 Eyes, which is the first track on the album. So, again, I listened to it all the way through, but overall, Kevin Gray one, as usual, I think he's my favorite mastering engineer that cuts vinyl for jazz in general. It's kind of a crapshoot when it comes to rock or pop type of stuff, but I don't feel he's not my favorite for that stuff, although he does great work, and hard to argue that his stuff sounds good or bad. I mean, it does, because it definitely doesn't sound bad. Anyway, so then I put on the Bernie Grundman, Bellman cut ORG version. That's, again, 45 RPM. I thought it sounded really good. I think it had a similar soundstage width. Oddly enough, I think it seemed like it may have had a little bit less of a soundstage depth. But one of the things that I really noticed, that I sort of noticed a little bit on the Kevin Gray, and I probably should have said this earlier, is the one drawback that I found to the Kevin Gray one is I was having a hard time placing where the upright bass was. I mean, it sounded sort of like it was off to the left, but not always. It kind of was floating around a little bit, where with this Bernie Grundman, Bellman one, I felt it was more zeroed in on where the placement was of the instruments. And I could really tell all the time that the upright bass was slightly off to the left. The saxophone was to the right, and then the drums and the piano were on the far right. And that was the one big thing that I would say was the biggest difference between the two. Now, that being said, the Kevin Gray cut, I felt like there's more air around the instruments, so there's better separation of the instruments, but again, it kind of lacked the definition of placement in comparison to the Bernie Grundman. It's pretty minor, and like I said, the only time I really noticed it when it came to where the placement of the instruments were in terms of left to right was on the upright bass. Now, where I noticed the air between the instruments was on the drums and the piano, because they're sort of kind of in the same space in the recording, but because it gave me the more impression of air or airiness on the Kevin Gray one, I definitely could feel like there was a little bit more separation, it felt like, between the two. And maybe that's also because it had a deeper sound stage too, because it was a little bit deeper. It wasn't dramatically deeper, and I wish you could measure that, but it's hard to. But anyway, I think both sounded spectacular. I would say also that the Bernie Grundman probably emphasized the upper mids a little bit more, and the Kevin Gray emphasized the lower mids a little bit more. So I don't know what your preferences are there, but you know, I guess you could say that the Kevin Gray one maybe had a little bit of a warmer sound to it because of the lower mid-range emphasis, and the Bernie Grundman, Chris Bellman one didn't have that as much. But I would say it's incredibly hard to say either one of these are bad, because they are not, and you're definitely nitpicking when trying to decide between the two. So, I mean, my take is, if you already have the 45 RPM, I think it's kind of hard to justify getting the new one, even though it's got a little bit of a deeper sound stage and a little bit more of that airiness to the sound. And, you know, I guess if you like a little bit more warmth and a little bit more air between the instruments, a little tiny bit deeper sound stage, it would be a valid reason. But like I said, I think the definition and placement of the instruments from left to right on the Bernie Grundman, Chris Bellman one is definitely more accurate, and it's definitely easier to place where the instruments are. So you kind of just have to pick your poison on that and see which one's better, because they are very, very close. And unless you're really critically listening to each one and doing an A/B comparison, I think that you'd be pretty hard pressed to find fault necessarily with them, because they both sound spectacular. That's kind of just my take on it. I would say that, you know, if you don't already have the ORG 45 RPM and there's still some of the Rhino release around, which I'm hoping there are, they only pressed 5,000, that you can get a copy of that, and I think it'll probably be cheaper than the ORG version. So I guess that's how it goes. If you have the ability to get that Rhino one, by all means get it. But I think if you already have the ORG, I can't say that there's any compelling reason to get the new Kevin Gray one. It's very good, and I guess it all depends on your personal preferences, but it's kind of 6 one half dozen the other for me, and I'd say you're going to be happy with either one of them. And I guess the other compelling thing for the new one is that the new one is going to be 33 RPM, so less flipping. So if you don't like the flipping that you have to do on a 45 RPM, I guess that's another reason to get the new one. So, but that is everything I have for this week. What did you think? Have you compared these two versions, or do you have another version that you think is even better than these two? Let me hear what you have to say. I would really like to know what your thoughts are, and if you think there's one that even sounds better, like maybe an original one you feel sounds better. But I would have a hard time believing that they would sound better than these ones, but you never know. Maybe there are some elements that do, because the tapes are newer. So anyway, that is everything I've got. So thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you've subscribed to my channel. If you liked what you saw here, hit that like button. If you want to subscribe, please do so. I love seeing new subscribers. And hit that alert bell if you want to know when my new videos come out. So that's everything I have for this week. Thank you again. You guys have yourself a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week, and I will talk to you later. Thanks.